Welcome back to Recalibragency. I'm your host, Danielle Photo, and today I'm pleased to have with me Wayne Pelletier, and he is the founder and CEO of Resonant Pixel Company. He has a really interesting background and agency journey that we're going to share today as we talk about how to foster ownership mindsets among your creatives. So Wayne, welcome. Will you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your agency journey, where you started, where you've come from, and where you're headed next?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Well, it all started many years ago into the future. What happened was nepotism. My stepfather was a computer geek and had a small boutique website agency. He had started in the mid 90s, and I was slinging web pages there in the late 90s. And I thought, oh, I might want to make a career of this. I don't know. I definitely want to be called a designer. So what I did was get a job at a startup here in Atlanta called 360i. It is now a conglomerate, ginormous agency. But, I learned a lot from there. And I figured out I can do this. And above all, I enjoy it. So then I made a couple of stops at other Atlanta agencies, half of them which have been bought and renamed Moxie, BKV, and got a lot of opportunities to work with some fantastic brands, Verizon and Home Depot and Spanx, and some really cool story building. And then, a stop at RMI with Ken Robbins, Response Mind Interactive, which was a great stop to learn a lot about direct marketing and direct response tactics and sales, and really tried and true. And then even a big corporate stop at HD Supply, where I'll just plop down in the middle of running a gigantic team, like, here you go. So I've kind of done it all from startup to large corporate team, as a designer, art director, creative director, and worked with just hundreds of incredible people along the way.
And you've taken this journey kind of like zigzagging around a little bit of being both an individual contributor, a creative, but also managing teams and directing project outcomes. Can you share a little bit about how your mindset over time changed from that creative mindset, the production quality mindset, into the leading teams mindset?
Sure. When I was a kid, I was always kind of just popped into leadership roles. Maybe it's just because I have a big mouth, or that I'm unafraid to say things. Whether it's hockey, you're squad leader. When I was in the Army, basic training, you're instantly a squad leader. Get to the front. And it even happened at pretty much every agency I was at when I was a younger designer. It was, can you join this meeting? And then, can you disseminate this information to the team, or tell the account team, or talk to the client? Quickly, probably titled up a little too fast. And next thing you know is you're an art director, you're in charge of things and process and outcomes that don't necessarily know how to deliver on. So a little bit is trial by fire. Certainly the digital space, advertising wasn't new 25 years ago, but the digital space was. So we were figuring out what's the real value proposition here. What do deliverables work? How do operations work when tools didn't really exist yet? We didn't have really cool stuff like, I don't know, Punch List and Notion and these things. Like, we were just kind of building our own and
it was the
figuring
Wild
out
West
as we
still.
go. Yeah. So when you have practice in a particular craft of any kind, I suppose, in mine being graphic design in a digital space, and then you have practice in leadership, then you can pretty easily connect those two. Being nice, being humble, serving people, those are great ways to get started. And you build from there by learning more about what makes a team tick, or a client engagement tick, or these certain nuances that you figure out along the way. And they'll usually tell you how to be successful, but you've got to be looking.
Yeah. And it takes the ownership and leadership that's already established in an agency, identifying who the other leaders can be and giving them space to grow as well. And it sounds like you had many opportunities where that growth was fostered. How can agency owners with small, medium, or large size teams foster those ownership mindsets and allow other team members to grow?
I used to say this thing to team members, especially younger ones. Your network will ultimately dictate your reach, right? So people are on a career journey, whether they realize it or not, when they're young or whatever. And people don't work for a factory for 30 years and retire that much anymore. It's not as common. It is definitely not common in our digital and marketing and advertising spaces. So I've always thought, what can I do to help them on this stop? Because I know this job isn't permanent. They're not going to stay here for 25 years, and the company's not going to let them stay for 25 years. We will downsize at some point, right? So knowing that, what can I do in feeding back on any particular deliverable or project? How can I frame this in a way that helps their long-term vision for their life? So what I used to say, and this would piss off leaders, so I stopped telling them about it, like my bosses, but what do you really want to be when you grow up? And I don't care if it's not at this company. If you want to grow up and have a booth at craft fairs, that might inform some of our interactions in a way that help you. I don't have specific experience in that space, but we can go on that journey together. It's more about investing in someone and their entire life journey, and making sure that they always want to be not just in my network, but in the networks of the people that are sitting around them. So oftentimes the best meeting you go to when you're an employee somewhere, especially when you're young, is lunch.
Yeah. Pouring into those relationships and genuinely knowing people and having random discussions. That's something I miss about working in office environments, is the random 5-minute conversations that would crop up. As we live in this primarily remote workplace now for a lot of agencies, what are some specific ways that managers and owners of agencies can switch into that mindset and start having those different conversations? Because that's uncomfortable if you haven't already started doing it. What are some best practices that you would recommend that they implement to start having those harder conversations that might involve an employee not wanting to be at the agency forever?
Yeah, I don't care if they don't want to work at my company. I don't want to keep you against your will. But I would say that it's interesting to think about the last couple of years and the pandemic environment that we've found ourselves working in, where remote work and remote culture is really probably even a new phrase. Like, there are tools for checking the temp or doing social things, breakout rooms via video conference and chat, or in Slack or Teams, or ways of having fun channels or subject matter, or using emoji or animated GIFs, hopefully not too much, but at least in a way that conveys emotion the way plain text just doesn't. So you don't need to name off all the tools, but I'm finding the conversation has moved amongst other owners. Certainly, how can I engage people socially and get them interacting with each other? I don't need to be there, but like, what do I create? And then what are the guardrails, and what does that look like? And there's no one answer. Every leader or owner is going to have to do something or engage with an application or a process that they're comfortable with. But we come from a world where it was always butts in seats means working. And now that that's been removed, now we have this environment where it's a little more fluid and it's been a little more stressful. And how do we manage that? So like, leadership EQ has become so much more important than it used to be, or at least we didn't intentionally research it. It was, maybe we would do some sort of like Myers-Briggs or like some other scoring mechanism to find out more about someone's personality, and then try to coach them through their, peer 360 review or something using that language, or at least using a framework. Whereas now we may still do that. The problem is you can't always see someone. Not everybody's even comfortable having a camera on. I have regular Zoom calls with people that I've never seen their face. We're years into these engagements, and that is okay, but it hasn't been okay with everyone. So it's about a leader understanding who someone is, what they're comfortable with, and then meeting them where they're at. And kind of, even when it comes to hard conversations, it's kind of, I'm stealing from a book here, but clarity is kindness. So even if it's bad news, you don't have time to read, you don't have the ability to read body language anymore the way you used to over video, even if you get video. And plain text, I don't know if you've ever misread an email, it's not expressive. So now you have to find out a little bit more by doing things like, what's your temperature today? Like, meat temp or something like that. Like, if someone is feeling stressed because of a social situation, and we've certainly had a couple in the past couple of weeks, not to mention 2020, 2021, like the social environment outside of our homes was so intense at times that people would bring that to their video conferences or their meetings online and be fairly inconsistent. Now leaders are trying to navigate that while they're learning new tools about how to even foster team building.
Yeah. How to create an environment where people can somewhat leave those challenges at the door a little bit without losing the recognition that the whole humanness of a person needs to be recognized in the workplace too.
Yeah. And it was a disaster. And sorry to interrupt, but leaders aren't normally allowed to be vulnerable. It's a weird sort of Cro-Magnon masculine part of business where leaders aren't allowed to be vulnerable, certainly not to some of their staff members or any of their team members. So it was such a disaster and nobody really wants to talk about it. Not that we need to do that here, but I'm just adding that in.
Yeah. And I think different agencies handle some of those things differently. Some agencies have established a culture where they just don't talk about it. And for other agencies, they actually find people that think the exact same way about a topic as the other employees, and that's built into their agency culture. Not advocating for one way or the other, just stating a fact. But because of that, it does inform what the interactions are going to be like between team members and owners and team members and everyone and clients as well. When building an agency culture where you want to have ownership ingrained at the individual contributor level, is it possible to push down some of the decision-making for even those bigger kinds of topics? What do you think?
It is possible. In fact, you have to do that if you want to grow people up and out of your organization, which absolutely is the goal. To serve people, you need to move them not just up, but out. Like train someone to take your job, that entire, Hackney premise, but it's not wrong. Like enabling people to be successful, you've got to be comfortable with them, getting some things wrong and finding coaching moments, because you don't learn anything when stuff goes right. So you've got to create an opportunity for them to not just take ownership of it, but to also teach you something.
Yeah, leaders shouldn't be the smartest person in the room. They should be empowering the other people in the room to deliver on the best possible outcome or ideate or come together and problem solve. Leadership should be more directional as opposed to like directive based is what I'm trying to say. You should give guidance on a path to go forwards on, but you shouldn't be telling them how to step with the right foot and then step with the left foot and then step with the right foot again. You need to give them the freedom to skip if they want, or cartwheel if they want, or
Right.
run if they want.
Right. Yeah. Prescriptive problem solving assumes that there's only one way to come at something. And that is a limited mindset.
Mm-hmm. And agencies that have limited mindsets die because our industry is so fast paced. You have to look outside the box and be agile and adapt.
Right. Well, to your point earlier about the different types of agencies or businesses and how they've gone about establishing that entire leadership process, what they've found is that team members self-select. So if you remember, the Great Resignation of late 2021 and early 2022, what we found was people were self-selecting because they were realizing something about the environment they worked in after they had been on lockdown for 12 months and they didn't like it.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of agencies have bounced back from the Great Resignation, or are agencies by and large still struggling?
It's always hard to find the right talent for a role. So it's hard to parse out how much of it was just alarmism because the market was tough. We did have a spell where applicants had far more power in that dynamic than they've had in the past or would have normally had in a typical year, where the employer holds almost all of the authority and power in the hiring process. And I think that made them uncomfortable. But they've hired back a lot of people. There have even been agencies recently laying off lots of people as they sort of right size their team because budgets have been locked down now a little bit or slowed because of the slowing economy here in the start of 2023. So, I think they did ultimately staff up, but when they did that with people that got 40% raises, 50% raises because they left another role because it was a great job market for them, they also found themselves laid off because they were hired outside of the salary bands that were established just because the salary bands were suddenly antiquated. And now that those salary bands are probably back in play, now you've got people you need to move out of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Let's dig into that topic a little bit more on salary bands, because salary bands can either constrict a role and the growth of an employee, or they can be used as initiators of growth path achievement. So what's your take on how to use salary bands in your agency to develop your people?
Yeah, there are different lines of thought on this, and I'm certainly not an expert in designing salary bands or large organization, but there are people that are hired that predate them that are too low and too high, and then when you establish them, moving people into them can be really difficult. So if they've been designed, as is normally the case, with the assumption that everybody wants to grow up to be a leader instead of an individual contributor, then you have a problem because not everybody wants to be a leader. And you're going to have a lot of people that don't fit. I don't know about a lot, but you're going to have people that don't fit that salary band at the top level, or an organization that doesn't see the value exchange at the higher end of that salary band because someone isn't interested in being a leader or isn't created to be a leader. That's just not in their DNA. Then that's when salary bands can start to break down. So you'll either move someone around an organization in order to make them successful, or you'll move them out of the organization.
Mm-hmm. What does it look like to create a growth path and what we can kind of coin as an exit path for employees that won't be at your agency forever, but you don't want them to opt out at a time that would put you at a real disadvantage? What are your thoughts?
You don't really get to pick when people are going to opt out. Life happens. There are changes. Someone can have a major change in their family or in their spouse's family or a significant other's family. These things happen. Change is the only thing I guess you can count on. But I would say that if you have the right conversation with someone and you start with the end in mind to say, this is how we see the role. This is the trajectory of our firm, our company. This is where this fits on the team. And we like to move these types of roles into these other roles. If that isn't something that's going to work for you, then let's talk about what will, because you could be a fit now and not be a fit later. And that's nobody's fault, but you can also be not a fit later. Terrible English. It could also start to, vibrate and have separation at some point between where they're at and where they want to be, and find a way of keeping good people in roles that can help them be successful, or at least achieve their goals and the business's goals. But sometimes you can't.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, sometimes there's no seats to add to the bus.
There's
no expanded roles that can fit what they're looking for. And sometimes that really just is the case.
Yeah, this weird assumption of permanence. Like, people aren't allowed to be honest with you that I'm going to work here for 2 years and I'm moving to Denver. They're not going to tell you that, because you're not allowing that to be part of their success plan. You see that as a future fail plan. That is a red flag for a business that's just out for themselves.
Yep.
But, they lose 2 accounts and they'll lay you off without, unceremoniously. So it's definitely not always a two-way street. So when a business has that kind of clarity with people to talk about the end at the beginning of the engagement and try to find a great fit, you find that your alumni network is really strong. You find that people are referring to you, people that should be employed or can go there and learn and do things. It's about honesty and it's about clarity. And, you don't have to reveal all the numbers, and employees don't have to know everyone's salary, though there are trends moving in that direction with some firms. But it's really about being straight with people when you bring them on. I do a thing where I bring someone on contract, and there's always a 60 or 90-day check-in. So this is the deal now, but in a few months, we're going to chat about it, see how it's working. You be honest with me, I'll be honest with you, and then we'll right size it. I'm prepared to increase, I'm prepared to decrease, whatever your needs are. And then we're going to find processes that you work against that will make the project successful and that you'll enjoy doing.
The concept of collaborative right sizing is kind of the money phrase right there, because it's going to be different in every agency. It's going to be different depending on how many team members you are managing and what you want your agency to grow and scale into being. But regardless of the size you are now, the size you want to be, how you operate as a team, you can always find ways to collaboratively right size the role and the expectations of how your people are contributing to your agency within the context of their life.
Right. Yeah. Unless you're at some like startup that just is bananas out of the chute, like growth wise, people grow faster than companies. Like a junior member of your team in their specialty is going to learn far more about that specialty way faster than a company is going to gain business opportunities in general. So and it narrows as you get to the top, right? So there's one CEO, there are a few VPs, there are dozens, maybe half a dozen of directors, right there. Every level, there are more as you go down. So for someone needs to leave for you to title up or get to the compensation level that you aspire to get to, that's all well and good, but that's also why people leave. But it's not bad that they're leaving. You helped them grow to get there. And for some reason, it's not always celebrated, which has always been weird to me. Like leaders, I've seen leaders behind closed doors get pissed when someone puts in their resignation because they're good. And I'm like, but you did that. You should be celebrating that you have had a tremendous effect on this person's life.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of shooting off of that point a little bit with the concept of moving out to move up. I think if you as an owner and as a leader, if you recognize that a little bit more as you're interacting with staff members in those lower level positions, it will make a lot more sense why people do some of the things that they do, or why they don't engage in certain things, or why they struggle with different programs that you might be rolling out that you think are great. So I'll give you an example, like training programs. Sometimes lower staff members don't really want to participate in building out those training programs because they feel like they want to level or move out instead of moving up. They don't feel like there's an opportunity for them to move up, but you're asking them to take on all of these extra responsibilities outside of their client-facing work. So you have to balance an understanding of what you're asking of your individual contributors.
Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of amazing learning opportunity is that? Interacting with HR, sales, account service, if you plan on being a business owner or a founder or solopreneur, entrepreneur, whatever, that's the most important stuff, not the craft. Lots of businesses start because someone is good at their craft, and then they realize, oh crap, I run a business, which is sales and operations, right? So one of the best exercises, to your point just a second ago, is participating in the creation of the company's SOPs when you're a junior employee. What a fantastic vision into how to organize operations.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think would happen for agencies if there was a greater emphasis on disclosing those long-term growth paths during the initial hiring and interview process?
I think people would self-select, and they may not be comfortable with that. They don't always, in the hiring process, manage it like a sales process where an early no is good news. Like an early no means you're not wasting time on an initiative that isn't going to ultimately land or last, right? So if you're clear with people and you're sharing, information about the organization and a level of clarity that they're not comfortable with, like starting with the end in mind type of conversation, like we mentioned, that business may not be comfortable sharing that information, which is unfortunate because they just need a warm body in a role. And oftentimes, and this happens more, certainly historically, with businesses that only hire locally, like I mentioned butts and seats a minute ago, like if the talent pool is limited by geography, then they got used to hiring the best of what they had from an application standpoint. Not necessarily the best person possible for the role, just the best of what they were looking at. And oftentimes that was good enough. The problem is if you're hiring for skills, those relationships start to break down over time instead of doing the longer term play, which is hiring for attitude and just spirit. Like if you hire someone, you could train anyone's skills. For the most part, skills are almost all trainable, but there are things in human nature that are not trainable. And if something can be an asset inside of a role that you're trying to fill, then leverage that and teach them the rest.
Absolutely. I am a big proponent that almost anyone can learn almost anything if they are willing to try. And the same goes, almost any owner or leader can teach anyone anything if they're willing to try. So what are you going to do to pour into your team members to help them level up and feel invested in your agency, even if their long-term growth path veers slightly away, so that you are building something that matters in the world and not just a money-making machine?
Yeah, it's normally around anxiety of needing to move fast really quickly, like having to extract value from that role as soon as possible, and someone hit the ground running. It is problematic in the long run to do that and not invest in someone to really understand your organization. So that person, oftentimes when you just drop them in to a DMZ like that, you just initially have conflict with people who are used to a process, or they could be stepping on someone's toes because they were told to come in and move fast, even though that may not even be in their nature. But now you've got conflict on the team. Like that old, I guess it's an old folks tale now, or wise tale about Zappos hiring, and you had to work in customer service on a call center
Yeah.
for your first couple of months. Like, it's kind of what I did, when I was hired by my stepfather at his little web design boutique agency in the middle of Massachusetts in 96 or something. It was a marketing assistant. I made
Mm-hmm.
cold calls. I sent out cold emails. I brought water and refreshments to the conference room. So when he had a meeting, it was set up appropriately. My job was set up the projector. My job was to reach out to people and reschedule things. Like, I think I was making like 18 grand a year.
Yeah.
It was like, just figure it out. But I saw the industry. I saw the process. I got to interact with customers. Another absolutely terrible task I got, sorry, this is a tangent, we're almost done, 30 more seconds,
You're
is
good.
when 360i was a startup, and I might be talking out of school here, I don't know, Dave and Brian, don't get mad at me, but I would say when they were a startup, they had all these packages similar to like my productized services. Like, they had these packages for like SEO, and they were like small. They were like $500 a month or something a young, hungry business would launch in order to get a bunch of customers, because that's how you get opportunity and that's how you get lucky, is through these relationships, right? So once they grew and the minimum engagement was 10 times that, maybe 100 times that, they gave me a folder, and her name was Caroline Ernst. She was my boss. And she gave me a folder, and she says, you have to call and fire all of these clients. Like 25
Wow.
of them.
That was when you were the marketing assistant?
No, I was art director.
Okay. Okay.
They just randomly gave me that job to go and fire 25 clients, and weren't paying enough. And they were so far away from being able to pay enough that we weren't going to try and save those engagements unless they were desperate and they got the new number and would probably pass out.
Yeah. What did you learn from that particular experience? How did
How
that
did
shape you moving forward? Yeah.
it was painful.
After you wiped the sweat from your
Yeah.
brow and like took a walk afterwards, what did you learn?
How to deliver bad news.
Yeah.
How to be diplomatic and talking to different types of people. Small business owners move fast. They don't get into the details a lot of times with some of the marketing things. They hire for trust. Obviously, these are blanket statements, but mid-sized companies, educational institutions, they all communicate differently. When it's your money, it's different than when it's the company's money. And there are different types of people, be it, Ivy League educated people and country folk and different types. It runs the gamut. And while they're all wonderful, they all have different ways of communicating, and being able to get feedback from the universe, from all these different varying types of folks, through such an unfortunate series of events. You learn a lot, right? It colors in your mind of a bunch of experience points that you would normally, take a long time. It was like this condensed, intense situation that you just kind of learn a lot from. But that happens in micro ways all the time. And a lot of the meetings that you're in, you're just used to it, so you're not listening sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Can you share a little bit more on that line of thought?
Well, what do they call it? Reading the room. And this is a little geeky, but I would say that having an understanding of openness, I suppose, like coming at something without expectations of how they're supposed to play out. And one example would be, oftentimes I'm informal on sales and new business calls, or on networking calls with people, to make some people uncomfortable. I'm professional, but listen, I don't necessarily want to close the business. I don't care if I don't close the business. I care that I'm working with great people, and I care that I'm in a situation where I can affect them in a positive way and their business in a positive way. So I'm not interested in closing somebody. And just like a minute ago, I said, I don't want someone to work here that doesn't want to work here. I don't want someone signing a contract with my company against their will to be the best of the worst. What I want is them to want to be here. And if it's a great fit, that's fine, but I'm not going to invest emotionally in it not being a great fit. Now, reading that when you're on a call does help to have video on Zoom these days, but reading someone to know how far you can take that, right? You just don't state that plainly, duh, but you do imply it in the conversation, and you start to broach the subject matter, like, when it comes to the classic ask for the business or always be closing or any of these cliches, right? Like, what's it going to take to get you into this website today? Nobody says that, but they kind of mean it, and they really like the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's about watching for it and seeing, once you read someone and you understand how they're communicating and what they're looking for, then you can just kind of give that to them in sort of like a subtle ultimatum.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, managing teams is a form of sales in some ways, because
Oh, yeah.
you are reading the room, you are negotiating constantly, you are looking for opportunities, you're looking for risks. It is like sales in a lot of ways.
Not only that, there are ripples in the water. How you act and
Mm-hmm.
conduct yourself out on the company floor or on a call when there are different employees who are in different emotional states or different mindsets, different relationships with the project or the company, how you conduct yourself matters, right? So if you fly off the handle on something, then people are going to remember that. Or if you're glib about something, people are going to remember that. And it may not always be fun. So I try not to assume too much, and be empathetic. And, to your point, we're this way with clients all the time. In marketing, we're like, know the audience and reach them with empathy and meet them where they're at. But we don't always have that conversation with team members, even though it's a relationship.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. Any final thoughts on how to pour into your team and help develop ownership mindsets among them?
Ownership of the company or ownership of tasks?
Ownership of responsibility. How about we go with
Oh, I
ownership of
like that one.
responsibility?
It really helps to ask them, to the extent to which they're comfortable with it, ask about their experience, ask them what it is that they need to get to the next level. And I know we make people set their own goals sometimes, and it's not always fair that they get to set their own goals sometimes, because we're going to tell them they didn't meet them and we may not agree. But I would say that it's important that they have the space they need to express to their leadership what's on their mind and be honest. So if they can't be honest with you about their relationship with the company, why would they be honest with you about their relationship with a project or their interest in leading? Some people are just gung ho and they're going to jump out and be like, I want to lead, I want to do this. And then you have to assess whether or not that's appropriate. But you definitely have to have the conversation. If you thrust somebody in a situation that they can't handle, that can be good or bad based on the situation and what you think about, are the opportunities for them to grow. But sometimes you throw them into something and it's too easy, and it can fatigue their relationship with you.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that most of the new ideas that your agency implements come from you, the founder and CEO, from your leadership team, or from individual contributors?
The best ones come from the team. While I love to think that I have all the best ideas, they're always obvious, and they're always based on pain points that maybe not everyone can see. That's why people don't always understand when leadership's like, we're going to do it this way, and they don't explain it. And they're like, why do we do this? They'll throw a fit. I would say when someone comes to me with a very simple thing, hey, we should do this way when we're spinning up these accounts or doing it, and I go, that's a phenomenal idea. I hadn't thought about that level of detail in that instance, and I instantly can see how that can help. I can't think of a time when I said no without saying, okay, that affects this other thing, how? And then let them problem solve to it. But in general, when they've popped up with something, it's like, awesome, great idea. Let's add it to the process.
That's amazing. I love that you approach it that way. And speaking of, what is something that you and your team have recently launched or accomplished in general that you're really proud of?
Definitely the productized services. Ooh, boy, what a lift that was. Huge lift. And it comes with its own set of challenges, but knowing kind of last summer, thinking that, we're going to head into a market downturn and there's going to be cash anxiety. Large project fees may not always be accessible. And I would hate for that to be a barrier to getting something started. So I thought about, and I looked at some of the businesses that are doing like design by subscription or SEO by subscription and these things. And how do I apply that to the creation of websites, which is something that I knew I wanted to lean into more and niche into more, having started a very generalist creative company. The website's something I've always done. It's something I really enjoy. It's a conversation I like having, just starting there, as opposed to some of the other creative project types things like, annual reports, not a conversation I love having.
Yeah.
So start from what you enjoy and then build up onto that, a subscription that allows companies to get started right away. And I think what blows people away is they're often shocked that I'm willing to put that much skin in the game and invest in their success by not charging them a ton of money out of the gate. And then to try and create stability in the business through monthly recurring revenue and build something that is more predictable than a traditional services agency when it comes to resources and staffing. And now I have a model for scaling. Right. I just need to sell a few more and we're off to the races. It's only been live a few months and there's a dozen of them and I'm just adding more every month. So it's gone well and I'm looking forward to its growth.
That's super great. I'm very glad. And I think a lot more companies are moving that direction too. They see the cash strapped nature of a lot of businesses right now, especially, and they're trying to level out their own cash flows as well. So I think you're off to the races in a really good way. I appreciate what Wayne had to share about building up a sense of awareness between your team members and every leader and you as the owner within an agency about what their career path is going to look like and what your agency growth path is going to look like too. Because ultimately you have to make sure that you have the right roles filled and you have the right talent in your agency, but you have to grow them and you have to be aware that sometimes they will leave and that's okay. You should celebrate those moments as well. Wayne mentioned that clarity is kindness, and I really want to hammer that home again because it is really easy to have interviews, bring on talent really quickly, especially if you're in seasons of scaling and growing really quickly and not necessarily fully understand their life situation and their goals. And at the same time, they don't necessarily understand your business goals and what that looks like too. So just have those transparent, open conversations and then establish a routine within your management and team development structures whereby you can measure the pulse, measure the temperature in the room, and hear directly from them about what they want to do, how they want to grow, what they want to learn, whether or not they want to become a manager or fill a leadership role in that sense, or if they want to stay a creative for their career and invest in producing even better creative work. Have those conversations, don't pigeonhole people, and help them celebrate growth, whether that's at your agency or somewhere else, because it will pay off for you in the long run through referrals and building great networks and reputation in various industries. That's all for today on Recalibrate Agency. Thanks for listening and cheers till next time.